Okay guys, welcome to our online shoot system. See how we go, it's our first one. We're going to teach the advanced core shoot today. We did a little bit of advanced core, or core in EPP1. Today we're going to get really deep into the concepts and really look at the coaching cues and compensations that you should be looking for. We're going to start with just the conceptual stuff. So the first movement pattern that we're going to look at is anti-extension. So a lot of the core stuff that we look at training, it's actually the resistance of a movement pattern, and that's why we call it an anti-pattern. So if I get Graham to lift his hands over his head, the first one's anti-extension. So any exercise that creates force this way will create a force at his core trying to extend his spine. So coming this way and it's extending, and his abs are working against that. So any exercise that does that we consider anti-extension, and that will be things like planks, dead bugs, and anything overhead as well. So the compensations here will be things like ribs flare and a significant extension of the spine, and I'll get Graham to show that. And I'll just pull his shirt a little tighter so you can see. So if you ever see anything like this, there's significant force going through his lumbar spine, shifting his vertebrae forward, and then you've got this rib flare too, which is usually the easiest way to pick it up. Okay. So that's a quick overview of anti-extension, and we'll show you when we're doing the exercises, particular things to look for each exercise. Anti-flexion is the opposite of anti-extension, so it's anything that's trying to drag Graham's core or spine into flexion. So the weight's pointing into flexion. So anything where he's carrying weight or lifting weight off the ground will cause this movement pattern. So you can see the weight's trying to create flexion. We'll discuss flexion under load later on, but generally it's pretty easy to see. We'll see flexion here as a compensation, so quite often here, but sometimes you'll see it in the lumbar even if this is straight. Graham's is nice and easy to see. Oh, there's a nice view there. And you still got a straight thoracic. So you can see it in a few different ways. They might just lose their stability at the shoulders and it'll pull them around that way. Or the kettlebell might be too far from the center, creating a large lever here, which will create more force. So there's a few things there, and we'll go into that a little bit more in depth. But we can do things like the glute ham raise and that as well to train that strength. But one of the best things is to do is deadlifts. Anti-rotation, we've talked about this a lot. A little bit of feedback, or generalised feedback from the last piece of assessment is really what's your line of pull, so I'll talk about that here. Anti-extension or anti-rotation is anything where Graham will be resisting rotation. So Pallof press is pretty much the most popular exercise for this. If I get it 90 degrees, so look at my line of pull. If I was connected to the band was connected to a pole, the force will be pulling him this way, creating rotation of force, and his job, or the core's job, is to resist that. One of the common faults we saw in the assessment piece is the band being too far behind. You'll still get some anti-rotation force here, but when people are doing a Pallof press like this, it generally turns into more of just a tricep exercise, like a tricep extension. Another one we saw was the band was just slack, so that does nothing at all, or you only get a little bit of tension at the end, okay? Or I even saw one that was down here, and it was slack as well. So you generally want to be aiming for 90 degrees at that end point, and we'll have this nice strong torso, shoulders back, and he's resisting rotation. Anti-lateral flexion is any force that he has to resist is trying to bring his torso to the side. So that's a perfect example there. So anything like a suitcase carry or anything single-sided will be an anti-flexion exercise. So his core on this side is working to resist that force pulling him to the side. And this is what we do a lot of carries for this type of exercise. And the last one we're going to talk about is actual rotation itself. We can use a band for this. This band will be too thick, so if you're going to train somebody to use a smaller band, but just for ease of use, because we've got it here, it's anything where Graham will actually rotate his core. Okay? So we can do this on cables, and we'll show you some exercises for this. But he's actually getting some rotation through the core during the exercise. And we see this in throws and all that kind of exercises as well. So that's the basic concept, is the anti exercises, and then having the actual rotation. We will talk about no-nos, which you'll see a lot of our traditional ab exercises that hopefully you're not still doing. And we'll talk about why we've moved away from those as well. Okay, so the first exercises we're going to go through are our anti-extension exercises. Let's get this one out of the way. We're going to get Graham to start with the dead bug. So you guys have seen regressions and all that. I'm going to talk more about the things that you need to identify when coaching this movement pattern. So as the leg lowers, what you have is the hip flexor, which is attached to the lumbar spine and the femur, actually pulling the lumbar spine off of the ground, which will create this here where I can actually fit my hand underneath Graham's back. So if he comes back up into 90-90, so you always have to coach to have some tension through here. You can have the normal curvature of the lumbar spine. You don't have to print it flat, and sometimes I'll put a towel under my clients' backs to maintain that natural curve or neutral curve. But the main thing is that they don't lift through here during the exercise. You'll quite often see people come back up around, allow their knees to track forward. And what this will essentially do is it'll peg the pelvis into that posterior tilt position, so that then we don't have as much of that anti-extension force. So when this is forward, now all that Graham's really getting is when he brings his leg back up, that right hip flex is working. So it's just become a right hip flexor exercise rather than an anti-extension exercise. And that's why you'll get your clients just getting tired in the hips and they're like, I'm not really getting caught. So it has to be at least at a minimum 90, and if you want to progress it, we can go further down, and that'll create more tension through here. Graham can have a little rest there. He should be able to continue to breathe through these reps, so it shouldn't be like a high threshold bracing strategy like a deadlift. We should still have that diaphragm down, pelvic floor up, sort of container type situation that we talked about, but he should still be able to continue to breathe through that once he's set that, rather than just lats on, all the cores on, because that's not what we're trying to achieve. Like what we're talking about in week 2 and 3, as the movement starts, his abs should switch on, react reflexively to the movement. The only other thing I would like to discuss mainly is the hands under the butt that you'll see quite often. That essentially does the same thing as I was discussing with the knee tracks forward. Is we're going to jam his pelvis into posterior tilt, and then there's no way that his pelvis can anteriorly tilt, which is what would happen with extension. So essentially you're locking that lumbar in, and then we're losing that ab workout, and then it's becoming a hip flexor workout again. To the exercise as a whole, you guys have all seen this, but we'll run through one. I'll usually get them to have thumbs to the ceiling because that's a little bit more natural on the shoulder joint, and then I'll just one leg out with the opposite hand, nice and strong reach. And it's just all about control. And main things we're watching for as coaches is here and watching the lumbar. You can see the rib flare too if it's a big extension, but generally it'll just be a little lift there. Have you got anything to contribute, Graham? No, all good. Then we'll move on towards the bird dog. Again, we've coached this last year, but we did see a fair few coaching errors in the practical assessment, so we'll go over it again. Again, we're looking for that anti-extension, so it looks like it's the opposite, but when Graham lifts his weight off the ground, the gravity is trying to pull his core down this way, so it's still an anti-extension exercise. One of the big ones that we have to watch is if he tries to kick his leg up too high, because you only have a limited amount of extension, we have to compensate through the lumbar spine to get that height. So he only needs to kick straight back, and it doesn't really need to go any higher than his glute level there. And even there we can still see a little extension, so he could have lowered his back leg a little. So just go out again, Graham. Just to about there, maybe slightly higher, but not much more. That's when it starts coming in. And the same thing overhead. With any of our overhead stuff, once we go up, we're going to have that anti-extension force there. generally thumb up, mainly because of the shoulder joint being more natural there. And I'll get Graham to do a full rep, nice and controlled. And we're just watching this the whole time. Pelvis is leveled this way. And one of the coaching cues I always use is try and push the walls away. So you've got like the Star Wars situation where the walls are coming in to crush him, and he's going to try and keep them pushed away. Still got a little dip there, so we're going to be nice and controlled. That's better. See, we fixed that there when he thinks about it a little more. And he should be able to breathe through that exercise. So you can do, like we discussed before, self-limiting exercises where we maybe put ball legs back so he's got something to control there. And you can do longer holds, so we can hold out for 20-30 seconds, but generally 10 to 15 seconds is what Stu McGill recommends, and then do sort of 10 reps.
You also need to make sure that we're looking out for what the scapula and the shoulder doing during the bird dog. It's very common to see scapula winging, so if Dave goes in his bird dog position, we shouldn't be able to get our hands here under the scapula, which would show a weak serratus anterior. So I'm going to cue Dave to push away from the floor, really engage that serratus anterior and tuck the shoulder blade in, and then he can perform the movement correctly with some upper body stability.
Okay, moving on to the pullover. Now I consider the pullover a very advanced anti-extension exercise because we get quite a significant amount of eccentric load. We briefed over the pullover when we're talking about eccentric work for increasing range of movement. So we are getting eccentric load on the pectorals and the latissimus dorsi, and you will get a little bit on the long-headed tricep as well. So as it comes down over his head, that overhead force will be creating that extension force on his lumbar spine there. So we'll be looking for ribs flaring, lumbar lifting off the ground. Generally what we'll coach is our similar stuff to what we talked about when we do bench pressing and all that. So we'll coach the glutes on, screwing the feet into the ground so that we've got a nice solid base here. And then at that full range there is when you have the most force. So it's the longest lever at the lumbar there. So that's where we're going to get the most anti-extension force. So really pay attention when he's at the end range there. He's got good technique there. You can see that he's not flaring. He'll give us a bad one. Easy to see. So make sure you see that whenever you're coaching clients so that you can give them a cue. If they're doing that and you can't fix it, this exercise is either too advanced or they don't have the mobility requirements to go overhead. That's about it for the pullover that we're going to talk about. Moving on to the rollout. You won't get many clients that you'll ever have to do a rollout with because it is very, very advanced. Be aware of the levers. So if you do have a very tall client, say like a basketball player, the leverage on this exercise for them will be much higher than someone who is shorter. We're going to use the barbell because we don't have a wheel, but you've probably seen a wheel, so it's a wheel in between two handles. Brain will be at about shoulder width apart. We're watching mainly his lumbar spine, but you'll see many different compensations in the rollout. Nice and controlled. I will generally coach people to drive from their hips first, so they drive the hips 45 degrees to the ground, and they go out as far as they can control. So you can see Graham's quite strong there and he's working at that sort of probably halfway. You'll know some guys can go down to their nose, but that's fine there. So things we'll see, we won't get Graham to go out too far, and I'll give him stability on the bar so he's not working too hard. So if I hold on there, you'll see this lumbar drop and sag down. You'll still see people carrying their butt in the air, so they're actually avoiding that extension force on the core. And then you quite often see the arms start to fail as well, and they'll just drop because it is quite a strong exercise on the lats and the pecs as well. It's a whole body core exercise, mainly focused on anti-extension. So I wouldn't suggest giving that to too many clients, but you do need to know what you're looking for. And sometimes really strong athletes will be able to do it off their toes, which is even a longer leverage on that center point. Anything to contribute there?
Show me eccentric one, just all the way out.
So we can do an eccentric one. So we're just going to do nice and controlled all the way out. You're going to focus on here, and then he can just drop the bottom, come back up. So it's very similar to like when we're doing the eccentric push-ups. So just drop, and then roll up however you like. So there's no load on the way back up. That's a great way to develop that strength to be able to do a full range one eventually. Very similar, but opposite movement pattern is the TRX saw. We did talk about this briefly, but we'll just have another more in-depth look. Do you want me to do it?
Yeah, sure.
I'll do it this time. So Graham can have a relax on his abs. Again, it's very advanced. I wouldn't be giving it to too many clients. I'll let Graham take over from here.
So essentially with the TRX, or we're reversing where the lever comes from, like the rollout. So now it's coming from the elbows and the arms, and we're shifting backwards and forwards. Rather than shifting away from the knee, we're shifting away from the elbow, so it's a very similar movement pattern.
You'll see the lumbar. I'll do one where I drop.
Yeah, we can see that drop there.
It's very hard, especially with my abs that are ready for this. And another great one is the long plank. So if Graham jumps into a plank, and you'll see they're all very similar, the anti-extension exercises. So we go out onto our toes, start on your hands and walk out. Okay, you can see it's the same force pattern as all of the last couple that we've shown you, and all he does is as he walks out, he's increasing that leverage at the center point, and we just got to watch for the same thing. So the main one's always this, the hips sagging or the lumbar extending. So the next section we're going to talk about the anti-flexion exercises. So if you remember, that's when we're trying to resist this rolling over type exercise. So one of the greatest machines to do those exercises on is the GHD. So for the setup, you can slide this plate back and forth for taller or shorter guys. And then we just got to position ourselves differently here for whatever we want to target. So we'll get Graham up. So when we're specifically trying to train the anti-flexion movement, generally we'll have the hips actually on the bench, whereas if we were trying to hit the glutes and hammies, we might have the knees higher up and we'd have the plate further forward. But for today, because it's core, we're going to sit him back a little bit further. His feet are locked in, and usually I'll actually pull my toes up a little bit for a little bit of extra resistance. So if you see Graham come up, now his erector spinae and the lumbar are resisting that force of gravity trying to pull him down that way. So anything like that will be our anti-flexion exercises, and we're getting the back side or the posterior chain to resist the flexion. If we want to make this harder, just from here, Graham can extend his arms straight out, and then we've increased the lever length on that lumbar spine. I'll let him have a little rest. So some progressions from that, so we can do just plank style activities there where we come up 10-second hold, back down, 10-second hold, all those kind of variations. And then if we want to load them, we can add some resistance. So if I get Graham who can use the kettlebell, so now he's similar lever length, but now he's got a resistance here. And generally I will still do this anti-type work, so there won't be any movement, he's just holding for time. I'll give him a little rest again. Another great variation is you can use the bands. So most of the GHD machines will have pegs, and Graham's got a band there at his shoulders, and he'll come up, and now he's got the tension on the band. You can see the line of pulls at the end of the lever, so it's quite intense, and his erector spinae working there, resisting that flexion movement and coming down. Okay, so the deadlift is, if you understand movement, is a huge anti-flexion exercise, and because of the load that we can use, we can create a lot of strength in the erector spinae through doing this exercise. So essentially it's the big daddy of anti-flexion. So we've taught you guys deadlift before, but we'll just have a look at how the deadlift pulls the body into flexion and why the erector spinae are working in that anti-flexion range. So as you guys know, you guys should remember all the setup stuff, so we're not going to go through it again, all the twisting your feet into the ground, lats on, all that kind of stuff. But as the weight comes off the ground, if Graham wasn't locked through here with his lats, you can see it's going to try and pull his torso over into that flexion type pattern. So we won't get him to do it loaded, but as he lifts off the ground, you can see that'll be the maximum period where the weight is trying to pull him in to flexion, and he has to use this whole posterior chain, but mainly the erector spinae, to resist that movement. So you can see that there, and if I get him to swing around 90 degrees to the camera, you guys will see that again. So you also have that crossover of the lat coming through the thoracolumbar fascia into that glute, so that also creates that extra tension, and you really need to focus on all the high threshold type bracing now, where we push the diaphragm down, core comes in, T8 contracts. So you're looking at more of that breathing rate, deep breath, lock everything in, and then all the lats and the back extension work there. So you guys should be all over that. You just needed to understand why that's an anti-flexion activity. The only other point I'd like to make, and I won't get Graham to lift like that, but if he moves the barbell away from his shins, and this is definitely a coaching thing that you guys should be aware of, and I think you are doing this in biomechanics 1, maybe at week 7. Now you can see that we've actually extended the lever, and you guys have got an assessment on this, but if we extend that lever, that's going to be more force at L5, S1 type area. If he brings it into the shins, we've reduced that lever. So we're reducing the risk there, and I'll probably just answer the biomechanic questions that you have to do, so make sure you reference me. Moving on from there, we'll do the RDL. And you guys know that this is just a variation essentially of hip hinging patterns, so deadlifts. So it's very much the same concept. As Graham drives down into the RDL, that eccentric phase, he's getting that anti-flexion force, so that the weight is trying to pull his torso into flexion. Again, if he allows that bar to track off his shins, don't go too far, we're going to create that extra lever, so we've got to really watch for any flexion to reduce any risk in that lift.
Another great exercise for anti-flexion is a farmer's carry, specifically a more heavier carry. So you can see there's a very similar pattern to a deadlift where we're picking it up and it's resisting anti-flexion, but as Dave walks with the handles, with every step forward, that load is being brought further ahead of his base of support, being his feet. So with every step, he's working to resist that flexion and turn on the spinal erectors. We're also getting huge stabilization from the shoulders. He's trying to not roll forward there. There. And we can see if Dave takes 2 bigger steps forward, he's increasing that moment arm, and it's much harder to stabilize the spine there. And with short, sharp steps, he's able to keep a tight core and whole core bracing. Anything else?
Okay, so we're going to go through the anti-rotation list now. I know you guys have done payoff before, where Graham and I both saw lots of issues with the line of pull and the setup, so we're going to go through all of it again. One of the big things, and I don't know how many tips I gave you guys, use the correct band for your client. That orange band is Graham's capable of using it, but most clients, especially if they're sort of 40 kilo untrained client, they may need you to do this. So all you have to do with these ones is wrap the band through, and then you can use this. What we want is about lower sternum, somewhere between lower sternum and belly button is where the line should be, so that when he's locking out, if he gets to that lockout position, you can see it's pretty straight there. He's got that nice even line of pull. You've got a 90-degree angle here, and that's creating the most rotational force. So it's all about what load he's getting at that extended position, but it should be reasonably consistent this way when he comes back in. Okay? Because the lever's lower, he gets a rest there, but the band is still at a constant tension. So the band shouldn't change, or the cable shouldn't change as he's pressing, the change in resistance is coming from that increased lever that he's created there. You can see that the band's trying to pull him this way, and his core is working to resist that. So that's what you've got to consider when doing the pale-off press. Coaching cues, we have been over this before, but let's do a quick one. Remember, we rip the feet into the ground, rotate in, rip a piece of paper apart, whatever you guys prefer. Hips are switched on, he switches the core on, so we've got that breathing-based system. Push the diaphragm down, everything engages. Shoulders are back, and then he pushes forward. So one of the biggest compensations I saw is you get your clients, they actually come forward like this, or they shrug. Okay, we should be able to maintain nice solid posture while doing this. Essentially, it's like an anti-posture exercise where the exercise is trying to pull you out of the strong posture and you're trying to maintain it. And then if they're strong there, we can add those variations that we discussed in labs 2 and 3. So that's your basic pale-off press. We'll move on to, we won't show you the cable because it's all the same. As long as you get those lines of pull correct, and the tension in the bands correct, you should be okay. We're going to move into our chop variations. So these first chops we're going to show you are more anti-rotation. So it's going to be a dynamic movement, but the core itself is just resisting rotation. And then in the later section, we'll talk about dynamic movement where we actually get a little rotation through the torso. So the first chop, we're going to go from high to low. So one of the feedback from the assessment piece is whenever we're doing anything with cables, you've got to ensure that Graham is loaded from the start of the exercise. If Graham steps back towards the cable and then starts from there, which I've seen a couple of times, if you hear those plates clanging, that means he's getting no tension at the start here, and quite often if somebody is from no tension, especially if he's gone heavy, what he'll get is like every force is equal and opposite, so when he pulls this way, it's going to try and pull him out of position. So if we start with a little bit of tension first, so that all you have to look at is where this little ball is. If it's off the wheels, he's got tension. He can lock in correctly here, all the same cues as the pale-off, but now he's just bringing the hands down towards his hips. His right hand ends up at his hip, and his arm stays straight through the full movement, so there shouldn't be any elbow flexion. So the only movement really is at the shoulder joint, and it's nice and controlled. And control that eccentric phase, because that's where you get a lot of that strength building up. All the cues are very similar to pale-off when it comes to tensioning up, breathing, all that kind of stuff. We've just got more of a dynamic movement now. We'll go from low to high. It's very similar, all the concepts are the same. Okay, straight arms, probably a more difficult lift, but very much the same. You need to look at where the tension is coming from. Arms are straight, all the movements from the shoulders, and that's about it. That's changed from low to high. And you can also do a center-based one, so we're just coming across the middle. Again, this is very, very similar to a pale-off press. He's just coming through the center line with some movement now. But again, the only movement's really at the shoulder joint. Anything else to contribute, Graham? Pretty good there. Okay, so more advanced anti-rotation exercises when we have the medicine ball throws. So it's a dynamic anti-rotation exercise. Whenever we do these, you either need to be outside against a wall, passing to a partner, or one of those targets that you see on the rigs. But it's definitely, you need some space. Be aware that the forces in this can be quite significant. So you're looking at your power type program, which is what we'll talk about next week anyway. So if I stand back, we'll get Graham in a half kneeling position. Now you'll do all your normal half kneeling setup stuff that you guys should already know. So where he's tensioning up in the hips a little bit. Nice and tall, so his spine's stacked over his hips. And then if we have a single arm throw, that's how we create anti-rotation. It has to be coming from the lateral position. If it's from the center, we're not going to have that rotational force through the spine. So if he's throwing a netball type pass, chest pass to me, that will be more of an anti-extension force pattern, because as he throws the equal and opposite reaction, we'll try to push him backwards. So for anti-rotation, he needs to be pushing more like a punch or a throw. So the first thing you do is roll it to your client, and then Graham will push it from that side nice and powerfully, and I can roll it back to him. So you can see he's getting a little rotation there, and it's quite powerful. Generally we go off the back leg. With boxers, I do the front leg as well because they use a jab, but most other sports it's linked through that angle there. Then to progress this one, I can actually pass it back to him like we were talking about in the early labs. If he's in a half kneeling position, that will create more, it'll make it more difficult for him. If I throw it laterally, that catching pattern there, his core is working in an anti-rotation braking type pattern, so it's an eccentric contraction. So if we throw it to his side, braking, and he can either throw it back to me like a rugby pass from there, or do that kind of pass there. So lateral, boom. So that's a break, throw powerfully, or it's a break, and then chest pass. So they're both anti-rotation with some dynamic core in there as well. But just be aware, it's very powerful, there's a lot of eccentric load, so we'll talk about how you program that later.
Alright, next we have the landmine or torsionator rotation. Doesn't really matter what you call them, synonymous. So here's another anti-rotation exercise, and Dave's going to start with 2 hands on the bar, and he's aiming to keep his core straight, and he's going to try and bring the barbell from hip to hip with as straight an arm as possible. So you can see here, as he comes out and away from his body, that lever arm is increased, and he's getting massive anti-rotational forces to try and keep his core aligned. A pivot at the feet and increase his range of motion at how far he's rotating. And we would consider this a pretty advanced progression for anti-rotation exercises, just because of the length of the lever arm and the pattern with the pivot. It takes a long time for people to get the hang of the movement. Nice. Anything to add there?
You can just eventually get to a full dynamic swing. Other than that, that's fine.
So while we're here, we can also look at the landmine press. So while we're doing this single arm, we're getting big anti-rotation forces as well, while the core works contralaterally. And as he presses, that landmine bar is trying to cross his center. So trying to keep his core aligned and press from shoulder to his midline. Both sides of the core are working in different fashions to keep his core aligned straight. We're also looking to get good reach to the top, keep that elbow out as he presses through. One would be a single arm dumbbell shoulder press. So obviously less support from the landmine, he's using his stabilizer muscles a lot more. And same thing, contralateral work with the core to keep it aligned in position. You can also do that from sitting as well. As well as anti-rotation, as he presses, he's resisting that extension force. You go with the dumbbell roll as well.
And I was going to do single arm dumbbell press.
With the single arm press, we can do single arm dumbbell as well. Now we're working at anti-rotation at a different plane. We've got some more points of contact with the feet screwed into the ground. So those hip flexors are working against his pressing muscles, using that sling for anti-rotation.
Just that leverage. That's maximum rotation force there.
Yep, and depending on where he puts that dumbbell, so we can either press here or out here, the further we put that elbow out, the more we're increasing that moment arm and that lever, and the harder his core has to work to bring that dumbbell back across his midline. And lastly, single arm dumbbell row. Same principles. Core
Okay, so we're going to talk about the anti-lateral flexion exercises. So I briefly mentioned it before, where we're resisting this movement pattern here. So we have to load singly or single arm to do that. If I'm loaded both sides, then I've got a counterweight. So I'm not actually going to be creating that anti-lateral flexion. So anything that's single loaded will create the anti-lateral flexion. And these abs on this side will try and keep those ribs and hips together. So if you see somebody leaning over like that in any exercise, we're creating a compensation. And you can easily identify by looking at the shoulders, because they'll drop to one side. The first one we're going to do is our single arm carry. So usually just a suitcase carry. And we have covered this before, but we're always looking at that shoulders back, he's tensioned up. You can put an arm out for a little bit of counterbalance, depending on how hard you want to make it, and then it's just a nice controlled walk where he's trying to maintain hip stability and shoulder stability. So if he takes two broader steps, quite often he'll lose balance. So if Graham comes back now, and we're just looking for that control through the torso. We can do lots of variations. We don't have to do them all today, but you can do lunges like that. You can do squats like that. What else can we do? Bulgarians. There's a whole heap of exercises that you can do where we just load one side and we create anti-flexion. I generally do bicep curls if I ever do them single sided, so I'm getting extra bang for the buck. I know a lot of people don't like bicep curls, but you need to know how to coach them. Moving on from there, the traditional side plank exercise. This is one of Stu McGill's top 3 back rehab exercises. So it's the McGill 3, they like to call it, or the big 3. So you guys have done the side plank, but we'll start with the knee bent version. So the first regression. So the lever's coming off the knee. So you can see that the lever is short there. Elbow's directly stacked underneath the shoulder, and he's nice and square this way. So we're looking for a rotation that way. And you can see the left side of the torso, so where my hand is, they're working to resist the flexion that Graham shows us. Go down, Graham. Alright, so that's what gravity's trying to do to Graham's hips and back, and he has to use those abs on that side to resist that rotation. We'll do a quick few progressions, let Graham have a quick break. So straight leg. So now, as you can see, just the lever's longer. So you don't always need more weight, you can just make the lever longer. Progress into, we'll do a leg off round. So coming up, and then he's got to maintain this, so we've got a more advanced one here. We can also tandem like this, so that's a little more stable than that last one, so it's probably in between. And I'll show you another one where he comes up on both legs, comes up, and then what he can do is like a corkscrew, so he'll reach this arm down towards his elbow here. Alright, and he's still going to try to maintain this anti-lateral flexion, so don't allow your client to drop, and then he just rotates back up, hand in the sky. So we're creating like a novel movement, and the core has to react, right? So you've got to watch where his hips are when he's doing that one. Plenty of other variations, it's pretty much limited by your imagination, as long as you're watching what his core and hips are doing, and there's no compensation, so rotating or hips drop, flexion in the spine, lateral flexion in the spine. That's about it for the side plane. Anything else? No. So the only other thing that we really have to talk about with the anti-lateral flexion is if he comes up into a rack type position, so anything rack like this will also be creating that force this way. So anything single-sided in any side or rack position will be creating that force. So if he does a single arm press from here, that core's resisting that rotation because that dumbbell's trying to pull down that way. But generally you'll see it a lot with like a kettlebell, so single arm kettlebell rack. And there's plenty of exercises here, so we can do a kettlebell carry, we can do kettlebell presses, kettlebell cleans. All those variations are working this lateral side of his core to resist that lateral flexion. Any other ones you want to talk about? No. So that's good. Okay, so now we've done a huge discussion on anti-extension, anti-flexion exercises that specifically target those movement patterns, but never underestimate the quality of deadlifts and squats to actually really train those positions, because we're getting much heavier loads, a lot more force, so it makes you switch the core on more significantly. You'll have to do more of a high threshold bracing strategy, but you guys should be aware of that. We've got Graham set up here with 110 kegs, just so that you can see how much core activation is required in a lift like a heavy deadlift. So you guys should know all these setups, so I'll allow Graham to do that himself. Okay, he's going to tension up, chin tuck position, driving through. So even though there's a lot of hip hinge, glutes, hamstrings working there, there's a lot of weight trying to pull him into flexion, and his erector spine is working hard to resist that. That's the erector spine all the way up the spine because he's got all the rhomboids and the scaps, everything's working the tension up. So heavy traditional exercises are great for core activation and strengthening, and don't underestimate this for rehab too. A lot of the, you get the strength, but you also get a lot of psychological benefits around psychosocial model that the client knows that they can lift that weight and they're confident lifting that weight. Any more to true? No? Okay. Now we're going to move on to squat variations. So we'll talk leverage rather than specific setup for the squat. I'm just going to bring the bar over. So it's not ideal to walk the bar far away from the rack, so that's only for tutorial purposes. So the first one we're going to talk about is the high bar squat. So now, as he goes down, you can see that his torso leans forward slightly, and that's a good technique in squatting. We want the tibia to be on the same sort of angle as the torso lean, but because he's got a slight lean forward, now we have an anti-flexion moment at the spine. You also see compensation sometimes with hyperextension, so the force will be pushing the spine into extension, and that's something we want to avoid as well. So if they're doing that, they'll probably weaken the core, or there may be some mobility requirements issues. So moving from there, so that's the high bar squat. If he comes down into a low bar squat, essentially what he's done is he's reduced the lever, and that will allow less of that flexion force onto the spine, and it actually changes the angle of his torso as well. So hopefully you guys can see that in that low bar position. If we're going to changing into the front squat, now the front squat, now that the bar is in front of the midpoint, we have more of that flexion force, but what that also allows us to do is he can actually sit up straighter. So his torso straighter, he's usually sort of looks more like this, but the moment arms are creating more tension at the lumbar, so they will work a little more through here. There's nothing wrong with your erector spine working as long as there's no pain. Just be aware that these three exercises are great for increasing core strength.
For our dynamic core exercises, we can progress our wood chop and our pallet variations. We can use these either for power development or just more advanced motor patterning. So Dave's going to come out in our wood chop position, and now he's going to look to add a bit faster tempo and a bit further force to his wood chop. So now we're moving away from anti-rotation and more towards training some rotation. We need to make sure that we look at the feet and allow Dave to pivot his feet. If his feet are locked and I'm asking him to rotate at a fast tempo, a lot of that rotation is going to come from the spine. Whereas if we allow the feet to pivot, a lot of his rotation is coming from the feet. Movement patterns are a bit more dynamic. A lot of his power is starting from the core and then coming through the feet, which is a lot of our sporting patterns look like that. Everything starts from the core, comes through to the extremity. Nice. And then the pull-off. Same thing, we're going to come out so there's some tension. Then he gets into his straight arm position. And then from there he's going to rotate hard and pivot. Also need to make sure that Dave's looking in the right positions, not looking at the band, but looking towards the area he's going to rotate to. And that's going to help with better alignment and lessen rotation at the spine. So we can add the amount of pivoting in. We can start with 1 foot pivot and shorten the range of motion. And then when Dave gets more comfortable with the pattern, we can add in the back foot pivot. So he's starting facing the band and rotating away from the band. Anything else there?
No, that's good. Okay, so again, some more advanced dynamic core exercises. We can just do your normal plank. Okay, we need like a push-up plank. And now just reducing the points of contact, you can just do shoulder taps. Again, we're really watching what his hips are doing, and we're looking for extension of the spine. You guys can create all kinds of different variations of that. The renegade row, so if you just slide on for this one, I think will be best. It's better off if you've got hexagon dumbbells, because then you're not getting any like rolling force at the wrist. Generally, you need a little wider base here, and we're just watching for rotation at the hips, extension of the spine. You're nice and strong through the scaps and the shoulder. But again, it's really advanced because we're in anti-extension and we're adding some rotational resistance there as well. And another great one, this is a really heavy bag, you know, a light one around for grab. So you can do push-up position, pulling the bag through. So we've got like variation of where the force is coming that he has to resist. All the same kind of stuff here, trying to stabilise through the hips. I'll let guys away with a little bit of hip shift, but as long as it's not huge changes and especially no sagging or extension of the spine. But you can see he's blowing, it's a hard exercise, especially with probably 30 kilos there.
So moving back to the GHD, we can make our anti-flexion exercises more dynamic by getting Dave to grab a plate and perform a rowing movement. So now the lats not only are working to stabilise an anti-flexion, but they're working in a rowing movement. And then moving on, we can grab a kettlebell and perform a single arm variant. So now we're resisting anti-flexion and anti-rotation as he rows simultaneously.
Okay, so one of the most advanced dynamic core exercises would be like a lateral throw with a medicine ball. So we have loaded rotation with power, speed and power. So it's definitely advanced, and you want clients to have really good control over things like the hip rotation, because we need to be able to do that efficiently before throwing any power in. The half kneeling is definitely a regression for it. There's less ability to rotate through the hips. So I wouldn't load this one too much, but you could use this to teach the exercise. So we maybe get Braden like 50% power. Okay, but you can see there's not much ability for him to internally and externally rotate through the core there. So we very much want to get them standing. And they've got very good ability to rotate through the hips. So I'll let Graham throw a bit of power in this, because it's a raw power exercise, and we're very much at the top end clients where they're really strong, and you've progressed through all the wood chops, rotational cable throws, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so fair bit of power. He can work on his accuracy a little bit. Definitely need to do it against the wall. You guys have been in the lab, and we don't have any options for wall slams, so I had to catch it, but generally a wall's best for those kind of movement patterns. Okay, so another great dynamic core exercise is the Turkish get up. You also get a lot of stabilizer work, balancing the shoulder. It's pretty much working the whole core, so you're getting anti-rotation at some points, anti-flexion at some points. You are getting some flexion at the start. So as you understand more, you'll see all the different components. So I won't explain every single core movement. So going through the patterning, you actually start on your side and double grip the kettlebell. My elbows are tucked at 90 degrees here. What we do from there is we roll over and press. And this hand comes out to the side. From there, same knee up is the hand that's up. This side, what I do is I actually create some tension in my lats, and it's kind of like a traditional sit-up, but I'm pushing the kettlebell straight to the ceiling, up. Okay, and you want this overhead. So I came forward a little bit there, the goal's straight overhead. Then what we do is we come up onto our hand, and I'm still overhead here with the kettlebell. Pushing off this right heel, I'm going to bridge up with my glutes. Then, the hardest component to learn is the sweep, or I like to call it the breakdance, where he brings his back leg through underneath that hip. As you can see, I'm in a flex position there at the spine. So this is probably the riskiest position of the exercise, and I'm going to control that up into an overhead half kneeling position. I've ended up with my foot a little far out. That's just, with practice, you get your positioning better. Then what we do is we come up from a lunge, straight up position. And that's halfway. We come down nice and controlled. So it's lunge, half kneeling position. Drop this hand back down for support. As you can see, I'm going into lateral flexion there. So that, again, make sure you're controlled there. Don't do this one with anyone with any back pain. Nice and controlled. Kettlebells stacked over my shoulders. I'm going to take the weight off my back knee and push through and long. Watch where this kettlebell's hanging. Drop the hips back to your elbow, onto the spine, and we're stacked over. So quite often people will go for their second rep from there, but to complete it, you can roll back down if you want to get rid of the kettlebell. There's a couple of variations from there. So you can do the kettlebell sit-up, so we start from here, and we elbow up, press, and we're just going to do that first sit-up, so create some tension through the lats, so push to the elbow loop, and it's just pushing the kettlebell towards the ceiling, and you just bridge up there. So that's a good progression there, or a regression to start building up that strength. You can see how that looks almost like an old style crunch. I'm not getting as much extreme flexion in that position. Nice and controlled. And then, Graham's favourite, see if I can do it. We come around, press, and there's a V-sit, isn't it? Yep. V-sit, rotation. This is the first time I've tried it, so is that alright? Yeah. Yeah. And then rotate around. And there's a few other variations you can do to increase the progression. If you just look at the movement and think about it, you can break it into the bridge or the lunge position, so you can break it up into parts to coach your clients if you're really struggling to get them to learn the movement pattern. So break it down into individual parts. Okay, I thought I'd throw in some very advanced core exercises. So this is only for clients that you've built up over a long time, and they're quite strong, and they've got a lot of stability and a lot of endurance in their core as well. So they're very innovative. You won't see them all over the place. But the first one I'm going to show you is a plank row. You need 2 benches. It's an anti-extension exercise where we're going to add anti-rotation in as well with the rowing technique. So you're going to be very diligent when you're looking at your clients. Make sure that they're not compensating through the hips. There's no back extension because there's a lot of leverage on this and compensations happen. So the first one is a plank. So we plank between 2 benches. So that's just like a normal plank there. You probably will need your feet a little wider for some stability. And then we're going to add in a dumbbell row. Nice and controlled. So I don't need much weight there. That's 7 kilos and I'm working very hard. Another variation of that, so we can do a reverse plank. Generally you need a little longer. On my shoulders, up on my heels. Okay, so now I've got my glutes, hamstrings working, erector spinae. So I'm in anti-flexion now. Let's try to push me that way, the gravity. And now if I add in a single arm press, I'm adding the anti-rotation into this one as well. So you're getting a lot of bang for buck there. You can probably load this up more than the row because it's a little easier, but again, nice and innovative, only for your stronger clients. Another very hard one is the bear crawl. So we're just in bear crawl type position, so knees dropped, hands, so we've got to be solid, we're pushing away at the bench. Okay, again, super difficult. Rowing. Give those ones a go. If you have the equipment at home to have a try, but again, very advanced. You've got to be very diligent on your coaching ability on these ones. Okay, so this section is the no-no section, and I'll try my best to explain well why we don't do these anymore. But essentially, most of it is we're loading these patterns that we were talking about, training them in the anti-movement patterns, and that creates extra risk of herniating or bulging discs, or even creating tears. So it's mainly a risk-reward balance, and they don't generally stack up well, and there's not really much positive transfer into any functional movement pattern where you would use these things. You'll see bodybuilders use them because I can't deny that you get a very isolated contraction on that muscle, but there's not really any value, and we can train it in better ways. So the first one is the cable crunch, and like Graham and I both had to practice this because I've probably done it once in my life to learn how it was, and Graham had never done it. So we're not the best at it ourselves, but what we do is we get the cable around our shoulders, we lean forward, and he just does a crunch pattern there, and you really have to roll into it. So you're actually just trying to create as much flexion as you can. So we've got this long lever here with maximum flexion. So the risk is high, and our reward isn't that much. Graham can definitely feel his rectus abdominis working, so it will have a hypertrophy effect, but what's the trade-off? If you hurt yourself there, you lose your abs because you won't be able to train for a long time. We'll move straight from there into a Russian twist. So it's loaded. Yeah. I'm sure you've seen these guys plenty of times. So you can see he's in a slight flexion at his lumbar, and then you're adding load and rotation with power. So you've got all the high risk movement patterns, and you'll see these done fast. So everything's high risk. What's our reward? Will that transfer into anything done standing up? Probably no, and we've shown you a whole heap of examples that are better. And about 4 or 5 years ago, there was actually a case of a PT getting sued for doing this exercise and creating back pain. So I think risk reward wise, it's not great for the client, it's not great for you. So I'll just avoid them. We'll move on to, what was next? Crunches and sit-ups. So if you just look at a normal crunch, so the load is his body weight, but it's still a decent lever, and his head's, the human head's quite heavy. He's at full flexion, and it's under load. So you can see we're not creating anything good there. Full sit-up pattern, he's just going to come up, and then all we're doing is adding that hip flexor to create the movement there. So he's got flexion under load, and the hip flexor is doing most of the work. There's not necessarily anything wrong with training the hip flexor, but we can train it in better patterns. For example, like the psoas march and things like that. And if I lock his feet down, it creates even more stimulus for it to be mainly hip flexor. So we've got that hip flexor pulling at the spine, creating that flexion movement. Okay, so another one. Okay, so another one that we're going to do is the legs flows. I'm actually going to leave the screen for this one, but you'll see when I throw Graham's legs down, you've probably seen a lot of boxers do this a lot, so you would have seen it. We're creating a high force movement on that anti-extension pattern, and it's mainly the hip flexors working in an eccentric braking pattern. There's no real reward for anything in a standing functional movement, but we've got high force, high anti-extension patterns, high chances of compensation, and you see guys flick up with a lumbar flexion as well when they come back up. So mainly the risk reward just doesn't stack up here. So what we generally see is they'll have people up in here, Graham will hold my ankles usually, you'll see, and you'll have your trainer or partner throwing the legs down quite hard. I'm not going to push Graham's down hard because it's not worth the risk, and they'll push to the sides and stuff like that. There's no real value in that because I've shown you more variations that you can do that will give us the same stimulus with very low risk. Okay, one of the big ones on the no-no list is the full sit-up on the GHD. So when we have a locked foot position, what we actually create is more of a hip flexor exercise. And then if you remember, the hip flexors connect to the lumbar spine. So we're pulling our body, the weight of the body, up with our hip flexors, and we're going to create that flexion force on the spine. We can try reduce it by Graham coming up with a straight back, but quite often you'll see people mainly flexing when they're coming up under a long lever. So you guys are doing Bimec 1 now, so you'll know that increasing lever increases that force. The other main issue is if you see in certain sports, they'll do this exercise, they'll come down and they reach, and so who has a load right at the end of the exercise there, he's in an extreme back extension. So if you can think about you can go back up for rest now. If you think about what's happening at the spine there, we're getting that extreme extension force. So we're pushing the lumbar towards like that spondylolithiasis type force pattern, and we'll talk a little bit about that on some slides. But the lumbar L4, L5, or even the sacrum has got this force trying to push it forward, which can create, if it's done over a period of time or the load's too much, cracks in the spine itself, and we'll explain that more on the slides. It won't necessarily happen every time, but you just got to be aware of the risk when we do that heavy load with a long lever hyperextension. Did I miss anything there, Graham? No, that's bad.
No, that's it.
That's good. Oh, that's back.
Not too bad, it was more head film.
Okay, so that's all the exercises we wanted to introduce you guys to today, and the main concepts. As always, we're just introducing you and giving you a taste of where you can go down. There's a lot more advanced exercises that you can do. The calisthenics guys will do things like dragging tails, flags, hanging toes to the bar, and then sometimes, I can't remember what it's called, it's like a lever, where they'll bring the whole body up as one. So there's many different advanced exercises with core, and you can progress and look at more, and that's just a sample that we have given you today. Most of your clients, you probably will never get them to that point. It's generally the guys that can do that, that's their thing, they're quite into that type of training. The only other things we have to discuss is programming. So where you're going to fit it into your program, and load management and fatigue, because you don't want the core too fatigued before you do an exercise like a deadlift, where we need the core functioning under a very heavy load, or something where there's going to be significant leverage. So always think about the lever and think about the load that they can lift. So generally with the programming, and I'll let Graham contribute as we go as well, I will usually put maybe activation type exercises at the start to get it going. So you might do something like a bird dog with 10-second holds, and then the first compound exercises in the programming for that session will be the ones that have the highest core contribution. So that's where we'll do our deadlifts and our squats first, or if you're doing something more powerfully cleans and exercises like that. And we're going to talk about power later on anyway. And then the direct exercises that fatigue that will be later on in the program, when the other exercises that they are paired with don't require as much activation and stability through the core.
I like to program more easier activation style core exercises at the start of my program. So dead bugs, bird dogs, maybe a short side plank just to get the core firing and activated for those heavy compound movements. Somewhere in the middle of the workout, I'll usually incorporate the more gross pattern core exercises, whether that's a ball toss, a wood chop, or a pal-off variation, something a bit more dynamic. And then towards the end of the session, where I'm looking to train the core for a bit more endurance, is where I'll put my planks with shoulder touches, renegade rows, plank with drags, something to finish off the session with a bit of core fatigue.
And the only other thing that you really need to consider is the strategy of core bracing. So is it a high threshold type exercise where we need that full brace hold type exercise, where we've got diaphragm and that compressed, hold, like maybe even a Valsalva technique, so squat, deadlift. So you have to play with that and figure out what suits you and what your clients like. Generally, I like a hold through the eccentric and or blow out in the concentric, depending on the exercise, because some start with concentric. And then the other exercises should be more low threshold, where you should be able to breathe still, but you still got that inner core activation. And then whether you want it to be reflexive, so the stuff that we've talked about in shoot 2 and 3, where the core should be able to be relaxed and then switch on when required. So if something moves away from the center line, it switches on just as you start moving, so the patterning is correct. Rather than say something like a single arm dumbbell press, you shouldn't have to be braced the whole time. As soon as you leave that stable position and move away from the center line, the core should switch on in that anti-rotation pattern.
After your client has shown that they have a patent core and they can activate and perform these movements like planks and more static movements, you should aim to challenge the core a bit more dynamically, where they're bracing and performing a task or able to kind of activate and deactivate it through these larger movements and ranges of motion.
The only other thing I would contribute to finish this off is, and it's not an area of more expertise for me, but I keep seeing literature talking about overactive cores as well. So when Pilates became quite a big thing, we had a lot of people with overactive pelvic floors. Erectus spinae is overactive in guys who do big lifts like squats and deadlifts, and that's the reasoning for a lot of their pain, is the core is actually not relaxing. So pain's not always correlated with core strength, so be aware of that as well. We also need to train the core to relax and switch off when not required, and that's kind of some of that reflexive stuff we've talked about. Other than that, I'm finished. Is Graham's cool. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and we're going to keep pumping these out for you so that you still get a quality education whilst at home.